Hey, good morning. It's nice to see most of you today. It's good. It's real good, real good. Hey, thank you for being here. I want to welcome those of you that are tuning in online, if you're out in the atrium, for those that are up in our Proud Peacemakers Lounge today, which did kind of a sneak peek this morning. So if you're not familiar with what that is, download the app. But basically, it's October 6th. We're launching Proud Peacemakers, which is just an environment for those members of our church, members of our broader community that are exploring faith, part of the queer community, want to make sure that they are connected in a safe space. And it's a way for us to honor that it's not easy. Sometimes we haven't done a great job at church. And so I want to welcome those of you that are up there today. And if you'd like to stop by after church during what I like to call the after party, the not so, everybody else wants to call it meet and mingle. I mean, which would you rather go to, an after party or meet and mingle? An after party, that's what I'm talking about. Thank you very much. You don't need to give in the offering today. Good answer, good answer. So everybody else needs to make up because they were going to give big. I know they were. So it's you can head up there. It's upstairs in, well, we call it the living room, but it's the office. There's a living room area in the office, so jump up in there. It'd be great to see you up there as well. Mary's up there. A few other folks had gone up, so it's wonderful. So, y'all having a good fall? I know some of you aren't. I've been a part of those. I know it's not always easy. Hopefully you're moving forward as you're walking through those circumstances that can be difficult. We're launching a brand new series today called Hope is Here, and I have an agenda. I don't come to this moment without an agenda, right? Anybody ever play Connect 4? You play Connect 4? Anybody like a Connect 4? John, are you a Connect 4 champion? You've never played Connect? Let's welcome John Smith to the stage, who's never played Connect 4. He was too busy growing one of the most amazing churches in America. If you're not familiar with John, John is our founding pastor here at Crossroads Church, a very snappy dresser. He came ready to go. He dresses up. I wear shirts of rum. Yes, I do. I want you to play me in Connect 4. Okay. All right? So here's what we're going to do. How many of you are familiar with the game Connect 4, right? I'm going to try and talk. I'm going to try and preach and play Connect 4 at the same time.
That's good. Ambidextrous.
Ambidextrous, he says. Okay, so if you're not familiar with Connect 4, and it sounds like you're not.
I'm not.
Okay, the idea is to take your rings here, and you're trying to get 4 in a row. So you'll be green, all right? And well, you don't have to take all of them. I think that's a bit much for one hand, maybe. I mean, you've done more crazy things, but okay. What you take turns, and the idea is to get 4 in a row. Okay. So it's kind of like tic-tac-toe on steroids.
Okay,
you know.
and I'm blocking.
And that's one way he said he's blocking me. It's aggressive, but okay, fair enough. All right. So, this is where he gets to take out all his anger from the last 5 years of me ruining his work. Okay, I totally I did not think through. Could I get a new volunteer? Okay. All right, so here we go. That's how the game works. We get 4 in a row. So I'll let you go first. You're not that fragile. All right, you go. All right, here we go. All right, so you're going to go there. I'm going to go there. So this is what we're doing. We're trying to connect 4. Oh, wait, hold on. Whoa, he's fast. Whoa. We have to take turns here. You got to take, wait. What's going on here? I thought we were taking turns.
You go 2 more.
I go 2 more now? How in the world is this? Okay.
You can go again.
I go again. He's so gracious to me all of a sudden. Oh, no.
Oh, wow.
I can't. Oh, wait. One. Oh, I see what you're doing there, sneaky. Oh, wait. I just put one of yours in. Oh, man. Now I'm stuck, if you know. Oh, crud. What are you doing? No. Yes. No. John, this one right here, you would have won. Oh, he just won. Give it up for John Smith. Thank you very much. So that's Connect 4 on steroids. Little bit. Need a timeout. Right, you can see he beat me there, which is not surprising, right? So Connect 4, right, is where we try to get these 4 dots connected in a row. Played this game with my kids, never won then either, right? That's the idea. Now, here's my thought on this. Life feels like a game of Connect 4. Right? Life feels like this opportunity where we're trying to connect things, and we're trying to find meaningful connections, right? But here's the thing, like we don't always get to feel that win. You ever feel like that? You feel like you're trying to make a connection. So like we want meaningful connection at work, right? If you're a fill in the blank person, there's your first one. I can always tell those of you that are because you're like, oh, you breathe for the first time. You're like, okay, we're on to the first one. We're on to the first fill in. I know some of you are just like, well, there's only 8 left. That's all you're doing. When does the after party start? I know that's what you're thinking. Okay. But here's the deal. We want meaningful connections at work. So what do? Well, the first thing we try to do is we try to understand the actual work, right? If we understand what's expected of us, right? That might be the first one there. And then what do we want? Well, we want to know the office politics. Y'all ever been involved in office politics? Never happens here, okay? But listen, then we want to know like the social realities of work, like not just the office politics, but like who's nice, who's not, how do we get to know people, right? And then we want to think about, well, what are the future opportunities we have? So there might be 4 things that when we connect those, we find meaningfulness at work. You connect those 4 things at work and you win, right? You have a network of social people that you hang out with. You can build relationships. You understand the politics, how things get done, how they don't get done. You know where your future opportunity lies, things like that. You win. Now we want meaningful connections with our intimate partners, right? We want to connect with a person we might be in an intimate relationship with, whether we call that person a partner, or maybe you're married, or maybe you've just been in a relationship for a very long time, whatever that might be. And so we try to connect a few things, right? We try to connect, we want them to understand our needs. How many of you want to be in a relationship with someone who understands your needs? Raise your hand up nice and high. If you don't, we can talk. Set you up with a good therapist. It's important that they know your needs. And if you aren't interested in knowing their needs, you might need the therapist more than them. I'll let that one set in for a second. Right? But then we want to understand their needs. That's the second thing. And then we also want to share some goals together, right? As intimate partners, we go, where are we going together in life? That's a good thing to have. We want to master communication. How many of you want to have just an intimate relationship with someone that you cannot communicate with? Anybody? No, we want to have relationships where we communicate, like we're on the same page. You connect those 4 and you win. You connect those 4 and you're way farther ahead in terms of having a healthy relationship. Then we want meaningful connections with our children, or maybe with the people we care for, whether they're little or not. So we want to understand their desires. We want to know what their dreams are for their future. We want them to know what we dream for them. I think of my children, and oftentimes I feel like Jesus with the disciples. I think Jesus believed in the disciples more than they believed in themselves. And that's why he was so frustrated, which is why I'm so frustrated. No, just kidding. Right, but we want to connect not just our dreams for those people we care for, but we want to understand their dreams, and that's a problem. A lot of times, let's be honest, we don't really care about their dreams. We're like, this is what's going to happen. I know better. I've been around longer, right? So we want to balance those things. We want to help those ones that we care for navigate from dependence to interdependence to independence, and maybe never even get to independence. Interdependence might be the healthy end point. But we want to navigate that together, right? If you're parenting or caregiving, you want to figure out, how do I offer corrective and how do I offer restorative discipline, not just punitive discipline? How do I help set boundaries? How do I give space for these little ones to make mistakes, to help them understand and grow? But I don't want to damage them in my discipline, right? You connect those 4 dots and you win. You win in that relationship of caregiving, undoubtedly. We also want meaningful connections with what we'll call the divine mystery. Some of you may call this divine mystery God. Some of you may call it the universe. Some of you may call it, I'm going to say it, you might call it evolution. I think we're all talking about the same thing, by the way. This divine mystery, this reality that's deeper than what we can see. If you're here today, if you're tuning in online, if you're listening to this and on demand, there's probably some part of you that says, I want connection with that. I believe that there is the possibility of connection with that. And so in understanding the nature of ultimate reality, right, we go, well, how do I develop some personal habits that keep me in the flow? Right, what we might call the flow of love. Like, that's a way to connect. What are the personal habits that I can do? How do I connect with others in a spiritual community that are experiencing this divine mystery in similar ways? How do I leverage that to make the world a better place, to make me a better person? Right? You connect those 4 things and you win. And I think we're trying to do that in a lot of areas of our lives. But here's the thing. We face a cunning opponent like John Smith. Right? I'm not going to use the word evil. I think that might be a bit much, But a cunning opponent. And that cunning opponent is doing exactly, I love that John said, I'm supposed to block you, right? I love that he said that. We didn't even script it. See, we're on the same page, you and me. It's hard, right? He said, I'm supposed to block you. And that really, we live in this world, and that we give that a name too, by the way, right? Some people call that the devil. Some people call it evil. Some people call it, mother-in-law. Whatever you call it. I'm just kidding. I can say that because my mother-in-law isn't in the room today. That was probably a joke that went too far, let's be honest. But that is my calling card, not knowing where the line is. Okay, so what were we talking about? All right. There's this cunning reality that's trying to block that. The Bible talks about the one who steals and kills and destroys. And no matter how literal you take those things, we can agree on the meaning and we can agree on the lived experience of it. Have you ever felt blocked? Have you ever felt like I'm trying to find meaningful connection here? I'm trying to move forward, but no matter what I do, there's something that's getting in the way that is stealing and killing and destroying my hope for the future. And I think if we can get past the semantics of it all, if we can get past that someone calls it this and someone calls it that, we can actually come together around a shared human experience and go, oh yeah. Disconnection then happens. That block happens when that path is disrupted. It's basically all the green here. There's nothing positive about the green. And there are some common disruptors. Right? There are some common ways that meaning is broken in our lives. And things like greed become a disruptor. Things like fear and lust and pride. And that opponent is a master at dropping those and blocking in the desire for meaningful experience and fulfillment. And I think that opponent, if we could give that opponent a metaphorical name, today and for this series, I'd like to call that opponent confusion. I think the real opponent to meaningfulness in life is confusion. That if we can find ourselves confused about a person's intent, if we can find ourselves confused about what's going on around us, that confusion often results in and gives us an experience that we feel in ourselves of anger. How many of y'all ever been angry because you were confused? You took algebra, right? Like you tried to learn something new. And you got confused and you got angry because there was something but we experience that anger inside of us, or fear or lust or greed. Please don't tell me you don't experience those things. We do, and we experience them as an expression of confusion. It's like confusion wins. You get confused about your relationship. What do? You get selfish. Got to think of me. They're not understanding me. We get angry. That's what happens. That's what confusion does. And in our confusion, we get hurt and we hurt people. The Bible word for that is sin. In our confusion, we hurt ourselves, sometimes self-inflicted wounds. We tend to hurt others. We experience hurt. We wound. And I do think that this is what we call it trauma right now. I think that's all the same concept. In fact, I've been thinking about this a little bit lately, that the idea of trauma, because trauma stays with us and trauma is powerful. Trauma is more than a moment. And when we hear about like the kind of scriptural description of sin as bigger than this thing you do, but that it's present and it haunts us and we find freedom from it, I think we might be scratching at the same concepts here, that our ancient, ancestors of our faith called sin, falling short, pain, hurt, with the trauma we experience. And I think if we're honest, a lot of us know that, man, that sticks with us. And confusion is oftentimes the seed of that. And I've seen it happen in all these areas. I've seen it happen in work. I've seen it happen in intimate partner relationships. I've seen it happen in caregiving. And I've certainly seen it happen in spirituality and in the church. And the reality is, when we experience enough confusion, there will eventually be a collapse, right? All those things that are held up, like all these things, then they fall out. I don't know how to get these things out of here, right? But at the end of the day, when you're playing Connect 4, that's how it is, right? All these things just tend to collapse out, and our world falls apart. That's what happens. And sometimes you do all the right things, and it still happens. And it happens in all of these arenas. So what can we do about it? What do we do? Like our job suffers, the intimate relationship suffers, the relationship with our children suffer, right? Our ability to connect with the divine suffers. And so this series that we're talking about today is meant to help us defeat the enemy of confusion as it relates to one particular area, and that is a spiritual community. But I think the big principle, you all are smart people. You know how I know that? Because you go to church here. But here's the thing. We can take this idea of clarity, and it can be applied to all these other spaces of our lives. But what this series is about how can you know whether or not this is the right church for you? How can you know whether this is a safe place to invite your family and your friends? How do you know whether this is a place that you should trust giving your time, your talent, and your treasure? Because that's how churches survive and thrive, is we as a community come together. And so regardless of your past experience, understanding what this unique expression of what the Bible calls the body of Christ is, what we value, what we're centered on, what we're seeking to accomplish together, is of utmost importance if you really are going to commit to it. And so understanding how we connect together, what connects us, what are those 4, it's actually 8 because it's a 9-week series, so it's Connect 8. These 8 things that can connect us, right? And so we're exploring these questions. Why should I connect with this community of faith? Always start with why, Simon Sinek. Why should I connect with this community of faith? Another question we're asking, why should I invest my time, my energy, my money here? Why should I? Another question we'll be exploring is, what is it all about? So you want to tell me why, but what at the end of the day is it all about? And this is what we want to clarify. And here's my agenda. At the end of this series, I hope that every person who's tuning in, every person who's sitting in here right now, I hope that you have one of 2 very clear responses to the next 8 weeks, okay? I hope that you either say this: I believe that connecting with Crossroads Church, through connecting with Crossroads Church, I can become a better person and I can make the world a better place. I'm in. That if I connect here, if I give of myself, if I support this place financially, if I allow this to be a space where the dreams that the universe, God, whatever words you use, has put in your heart to be a place where those can be released, that I can make myself a better person, I can make the world a better place, I am in, and I'll tell everybody about it. Or I hope that you say, I believe that by disconnecting from Crossroads Church, I can become a better person and I can make the world a better place. I'm out. Isn't that a good church growth strategy? I hope that it's that clear, that you say, I will be a better person and I can make the world a better place if I don't participate here, if I don't connect here, if I don't give of myself here, if I don't commit my time and my talent and my money to this place. I will be better off. The world will be a better place. I'm out. I hope that you have one of those 2 experiences. And the Bible does give us some wisdom about this. Hebrews chapter 10, verse 24 through 25 gives us a really famous passage that is often used to put on people kind of a moral command to go to church, right? That you're the worst person on the planet if you don't go to church. So I want to kind of redeem this passage a little bit. Now, real quick, just a little bit of background on this thing we call the letter to the Hebrews. How many of y'all ever heard of the letter to the Hebrews? Anybody ever heard of this? Those of you that haven't, you're the healthy ones in the room. Okay, so here, that's what I always like to say. If you have never heard of some of this stuff in the Bible, you're doing just fine, okay? But I hope that you hear it here and it is helpful, okay? Now, by the way, those of you that maybe you've had a bad experience with the Bible, maybe you've had somebody use it to control you, manipulate you, I think that's absolutely awful, and I'm truly sorry for that. My way of thinking about the Bible hopefully frees you from that. Hopefully you understand that the obligation as a follower of Jesus is to ask this question. Not what does the Bible tell me to do, but what does love ask of me? That's the ultimate question. And Scripture is beautiful. I love it. People accuse me of I love Scripture. I just think I think it's a bad rule book. I think it's a bad rule book. But I think it offers us all kinds of wisdom. So we approach Scripture here as wisdom. We learn from it, okay? So I just hopefully you take a little bit of a breath there if the idea of the Bible is a little scary or traumatic for you. I just want you to know you're seen, and I totally get that. Now, the big metaphor in this, what's called the letter to the Hebrews, is this metaphor that the writer gives us of Jesus as what's called the great high priest who offers himself once and for all a sacrifice. Now, this metaphor speaks ultimately to the earliest followers of Jesus and their belief in the significance of Jesus. Why? Because a high priest was a very significant person. Technically speaking, according to the law of Moses, there would be one high priest for their entire lifetime. They would serve for life. You had to be of a certain lineage. This was a big deal. Like the high priest was like the one who made the sacrifice once a year that put the people, reconciled them with God. And this was all based, by the way, on an ancient understanding and way of seeing the gods, okay? And so there's not an ancient culture out there that I know of that understood to have a relationship with deities or gods without sacrifice. It was almost necessary for humanity to be able to figure out how to navigate the pressures of life. Well, plants aren't growing. We must have made the gods upset, so let's go make a sacrifice and then the rain will fall. How many of you would say, you don't have to raise your hand, but how many of you would say you don't hold to that worldview any longer? Good, fair enough. You can thank Jesus for that. But that was like the commonplace, so the only way to think of it. Now, the writer of Hebrews is using this as what's the word I'm going to say for those of you that have been around a while? Metaphor. Metaphor. The writer of Hebrews does not think this is literal because the writer of Hebrews knows that Jesus could never have literally been the high priest. He wasn't of the right line. He couldn't have been. There could only be one high priest. There was already a high priest. So the writer of Hebrews knows this is a metaphor. And not only is he the metaphor for the high priest, the one who like mediates and fixes the relationship with God and the people, is also the sacrifice itself. And we're not supposed to take these things literally. The writer of Hebrews, like I said, knew that. Now, there's an author who wrote the book that we give out to you if you're a new person here, a guy by the name of Marcus Borg, and he said this. He said, so also the language of sacrifice, of Jesus as sacrifice, is metaphorical. He was not literally a divine human sacrifice planned and required by God so that our sins can be paid for and we can be forgiven. This interpretation, this idea is called penal substitutionary atonement theory, and that's why I get paid. Because I can say that without batting an eye. Penal substitutionary atonement theory. Now, I don't use those words when I speak to junior hires because they can't get past the word penal. That was a pretty good joke. Even those of you that are still moral theists thought that was funny. I know. Okay, so listen. That theory that the only way to God was somebody paying the price, that the whole reason Jesus died was God ordained, it had to happen, comes from a literalizing of these powerful metaphors in the language of Hebrews. And it comes to us from a much later time, a guy named Ansel in about the year 1000, a little later than 1000. This is where we get that language from. And I agree with scholars like Marcus Borges who say, Marcus who says, listen, in Hebrews, this letter, right? And in the New Testament, generally speaking, when the language of sacrifice is used, right? What Jesus sacrificed was his life because of his passion for God. his passion for what he believed was his purpose in life, to speak of justice, to speak of love, to speak of a God, that's a good, there you go, to speak of a guide, maybe that's the word you want to use for God, who is as close as the water of the Jordan River. All you got to do is go dip in the water. You don't need to go to the temple, right? It's a beautiful, but this is what Jesus, so to sacrifice was to make a gift of one's life. In fact, we see this in the scripture where Paul says, therefore I urge you, in view of God's mercy, to offer yourselves as living sacrifices. How many of you take that literally? None of you, because you're all alive and you're standing here, you're sitting here. But it's that same language of we present our lives as a gift. Why? Not because some guy like me or some woman stands up and says, this is what you have to do to make God happy, because we are passionate about what we believe the things of God are for this world. Justice, mercy, love, inclusion. And so that passion drives us. That's what Jesus did. Not because God required it, but because of his passion for his understanding of God and his understanding of God's will. And what's powerful about this language in Hebrews is it completely subverts the authority of the temple. Any contrarians in the house, you're just kind of like, don't tell me what to do. Raise your hand up nice and high. Raise your hand up nice and high. Pastors love you. Don't tell me what to do. Like, well, what else am I going to do with my life as a pastor if I can't tell you what to do, right? But here's what's powerful about this language. It completely subverts temple theology, which said, if you want to experience God, we're the brokers. You got to go through us. If you want access to God, if you want access to blessing, if you want access to truth, we're the gatekeepers. And so what Hebrews is getting at with this language is that Jesus is showing you that that's no longer necessary. It's ending that way of thinking. And that's powerful. And it only becomes really, really unhealthy and dangerous when we literalize it. Then we get pictures of God that are quite scary, actually. This moral monster who requires the death of the innocent. Whew. And so in this metaphor, it offers us hope that in Jesus, God has removed whatever you think separates you from God. That's powerful. That'll change your life. That'll change your whole experience. Okay, now we don't know who wrote the letter to Hebrews. It's probably written towards the end of the first century, so maybe think 50 to 60, 70 years after Jesus. And a lot of folks say, hey, this could have been written by one of Paul's companions, like Priscilla, could have had a female author, which is wonderful. I love that theory, right? So it's kind of the second generation of followers of Jesus. And they're kind of giving up, quite honestly. They faced a little bit of persecution. They were told by Paul and others that the world is coming to an end, that Jesus is returning, that the resurrection began in Jesus, God's going to clean up this whole place. It's not happening. And so they're kind of what is the deal? Is it worth it? Maybe we should be going back to the temple. What is happening here? And here's what it says, Hebrews chapter 10, right? There's been this encouragement to stick with it. And then the writer says this, let us consider how to provoke one another to love and good deeds, not neglecting to meet together, as is the habit of some, but encouraging one another, all the more as the day approaches. Okay? So the author here is offering some clarity. There's confusion that is set in. Why are we suffering? Why hasn't Jesus come back? Are you all full of it? What's going on here? Why are we even getting together? Aren't we getting together to wait for the mothership? And the mothership isn't coming. What the heck? And now the writer is saying, okay, let me clarify some things. Let me clarify some things about the day, right? As the day approaches. There was a belief in the first century. And it carried on that the day of the Lord was coming. This is a Hebrew concept, that it was a day in which the cleanup of the world was going to happen. But the day wasn't happening. So we start to see a shift in the thinking. Maybe we thought about the day wrong. Maybe Paul and Peter, for all their greatness, they got it wrong. When Peter stood up on the day of Pentecost, we have it in Acts, and he says, repent, believe, be baptized, right? For the forgiveness, so that you can be saved, right? Peter was not talking about being saved from some medieval concept of hell. He was talking about because this Jesus that you crucified is going to come back and clean house. And you don't want to be on the naughty list. And then it didn't happen. So does that mean we throw it all away? No. It means we learn from it. We get wisdom from it. And we learn some humility that we don't walk around going, well, God told me. Like, well, maybe. But maybe we think on that for a second. So the writer of Hebrews is helping this, right? And so he says, or she says, let's clarify the confusion about the day here, right? All the more as you see the day approaching. What are you supposed to do? Here's what you do. The question, do we bother gathering if the world's going to end? Well, it's closer than it was before. So yes, you should come together. Why? Because the clearest embodiment of connecting and supporting one another for those in antiquity was gathering regularly in the same physical space. I don't know if you know this or not, some of you that were born in the 90s or 2000s. We didn't have the internet in the first century. We didn't, okay? We didn't really know how to connect outside of getting everybody in the same space. That's why people like me are still like, we need to get together, be in the same room. Because we're old. But we know that there's meaningful connection that happens in different ways. So let's not get caught up in the law of this, but recognize the idea is, listen, connecting is the way you come together. That's how you approach this. There was no other way to connect, so don't forsake gathering together. The day's closer than it was. So yes, keep coming together. And connection was the clearest path and was a clear opportunity to do what? To encourage one another in the difficulty of the time. Hey, don't get confused. If you disconnect from each other, how are you going to be able to encourage one another? Right? The writer says, let's provoke one another good deeds, but don't neglect meeting together. Why? Some are doing it. Don't do that because you can't encourage each other. The implication in the wording is, don't neglect meeting together. Some people are doing that and they're finding discouragement in it. But encourage one another. You come together. And so connection, right, was a clarity for here's how you deal with disappointment. The day isn't here. You connect. There's clarity there. You're going to come together and you're going to encourage each other in your suffering. Those of you that are feeling pain and hurt and hopelessness are going to be encouraged by those who aren't in the moment, and you're going to listen and go back and forth, right? And connection for the author also offered the clearest path to a greater capacity for love and goodness. And I still believe this is true, by the way. I still believe that gathering together offers us a unique opportunity because collectively we can do more good together than we can individually. Right? There is this reality that by coming together, by uniting, right, we can get synergy and we can produce more good in the world through being organized at some measure. So the writer is offering clarity in this. Let us consider how to provoke one another to love and good deeds. This ultimately is about how we encourage each other to love, to do good deeds. So how are we going to do that? Well, we're not going to neglect meeting together. We're going to gather together. We're going to encourage each other. And we're going to do this in our confusion about what we were told God was going to do. See what I mean? There's such beauty in that. We gather together because life doesn't always happen the way you're told it's going to. Y'all ever experienced that? Woke up one day and went, hold on a second, I didn't sign up for this nonsense. I didn't see myself here. This wasn't the storyline. I did all the right things. And they told me if I went to church and if I read my Bible every day and if I gave in the offering, if I had a Christian marriage, whatever the heck that is. I think Christian is a terrible adjective, by the way. I might have crossed the line there, but it's just what I think. It's not a bad noun, it's a terrible adjective. What does that even mean? But you said I did all the right things and then here I am. Here I am. What? Here I am. They weren't supposed to die early. This wasn't supposed to happen to my kids. This wasn't supposed to happen to my spouse. I wasn't supposed to. What? How? So you gather, what the writer's saying is you gather together to encourage each other because that's life. And there's power in that. And that to me is the inspiration of the text. Is yeah, sure, their disappointment and doubt was God's going to clean all this up and all the oppression that we're experiencing is going to end, and it didn't. well, you might not experience some of those same things, but you can't tell me you don't experience the hurt and pain of disappointment in life. And that's a beautiful part of gathering together. So here's what I don't want us to miss. Go like a few levels high on this. That's what's happening in the text, but go a few levels high. Is that clarity? The writer offering clarity to everyone about why you actually get together, what this is all about. It diminished confusion and it strengthened the opportunity for connection. And that's what we want to do. So, real quickly, how are we going to do this? Okay? How are we going to build connection? What are we going to clarify? All right? So, over the next 8 weeks, we're going to talk about forces of connection. Not the Force, totally different for you Star Wars fans out there. But we're going to talk about forces, realities that connect us. What is it that pulls us together? Bind us together, Lord. How many of y'all know that song? Come on, my 80s. We're my 80s and 90s Christians in the house. But some of you are so embarrassed to be here. Oh my gosh, I just did that. Right, so what are those things that if we know them, they can draw us together and they can overcome our differences, all right? So we're going to talk about some connecting forces. The first thing we're going to talk about is a connecting force of the shared vision, right? I don't have these all written down for you in your notes, so you're just going to have to listen. We're going to talk about them for 8 weeks, okay? Connecting force of shared vision does what? Makes us a focused community. Secondly, we're going to talk about the connecting force of a shared theology, a shared way of talking about God, and that makes us a peacemaking community. Then we're going to explore the connecting force of a shared burden. And believe it or not, when we share our burdens, we become a growing community. When we cry together, when we carry each other's burdens, when we are a safe place for that, we become a growing community. We're going to talk about the connecting force of shared laughter that makes us a fun community. The connecting force of shared responsibility that makes us a generous community. The connecting force of shared talents, that everyone has gifts and talents. And how if we connect with those, we become a creative community. We're going to talk about the connecting force of a shared learning, that we're here to learn together. And that makes us a wise community. And then we're going to talk about the forces of a shared humility. When we share humility, we become an inclusive community. And on that day, we're going to celebrate the last year of our church. And we have our annual ministry celebration that day. And we're going to be talking about this reality that this is who we are. And here's what I want to say. I'm going to invite the band to come on out. The connecting forces that we share together, that bring us together, they don't make us right, okay? But they make us unique. I have no idea if we're right. Not what you want to hear, right? How could you know? So I'm not here to say that another church that expresses their understanding of go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, like that great commandment, love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and love your neighbor. I am not here to tell you that other churches that express that in other ways are wrong. That's part of the problem, that's fundamentalism. My way is the way, there's no other way. It happens in liberal and progressive spaces. I'm just not interested in that discourse anymore. This is what I feel like the universe, God, the Spirit, whatever words you want to use, this is what we think we're supposed to do right now and be right now, and it's necessary and needed. And so we're unique. I think we're right. I mean, I wouldn't do it if I thought we were wrong, you know. But that idea of right and wrong, that binary is really not healthy. And it just creates enemies that we're supposed to love, and it just makes following Jesus harder. So I want to just say that we're a unique expression of what the New Testament calls the body of Christ. And these connective forces bring clarity to how we think about good news for all people, that unto us is born this day in the city of David, the Messiah. Like, that's why I love Christmas around here, because we say we're about peace on earth, and Christmas is the announcement of good news, of great joy for all people. That in the city of David is born one who can break down all the things that we build up to say God is other, God is separate, God is distant. And this Jesus showed us that no, God is very present. that it doesn't matter if it's that mountain or this mountain, that God is user-friendly. You don't need temple. You don't need people like me. You don't no. These things we can leverage, but God is present. And this makes the world a better place when we have clarity as a church. It makes me a better person because there are two very important outcomes that emerge in a community that has clarity. First is unity. The first is unity. Clear communities are unified communities. And unified growth is sustainable growth. I'm going to say that again. Unified growth is sustainable growth. It is not always the fastest. And sometimes you got to go through a dip because you got to clarify what you're about and who you are about and why you are about. And there's a disconnect and there might be some confusion, but once there's the unity and once you're unified, it's a healthy growth that is sustainable because people are coming together and they know what to expect. And when you know what to expect, it creates safe communities. Because you know from the moment exactly what guides the decision makers of that community. It's the mission, it's the vision, it's the values. It's not some random words that mean 16 different things to different people. What are we all about here? We're all about making disciples. Well, what does that mean? What does that actually, and what does a disciple look like? What does that mean? Well, I think I'm proud to say at Crossroads, we know exactly what that means. And if you want to know what that means, sign up for 101, and then 201, and then 301, and then 401, and you'll understand the peacemaking path of Jesus. And it starts with a fresh perspective. This is the way we talk about God and those things. And then here's what the way of peace looks like practically in our lives. 6 commitments we can make that keep us on the peacemaking path. And then we talk about the unacceptable truths in 301. Where do those paths lead us? What is unacceptable in our world because we've accepted certain things? And where do these values drive us to bring about goodness and mercy and grace and love? And then the 4th stop you're in right now. Should I do it with these people? What is this place all about? There's a little bit of the method to the madness over the last few years. And so we're here together, building on an amazing foundation, answering the same question that was asked 27 years ago in John Smith's living room. Blah, 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 blah. Such a beautiful story. What does it mean to create a church for people that don't feel welcome at church? It's the exact same question. Almost 3 decades later, the answer is going to be different. And I think it's going to be just as beautiful as it ever was. And that's why we're here. So, I hope you'll stick with it. I hope you'll stay connected, online, in person, whatever it might be. And I hope you'll fall in love with your church again or for the first time. I hope that you'll become a member. These are my agendas, by the way. I said I have agendas. I hope you'll become a member. I hope you'll give financially and support this work because it's desperately needed, this place and this time in history. I hope you'll do that, but I hope you do it because you love the place, not because you believe in some divine God that punishes you if you don't give, right? But because you believe in the work. And you believe in what we're doing together. I hope that you'll invite friends and family to this very special place. That's the agenda. That's the hope. And I hope that you'll find hope here for your own life. That this will be a space for when you walk through the valleys of the shadow of death, you will have meaningful connections that walk alongside of you because that's what it's all about, by the way. That's what it's all about. As much as I love this, you coming and listening to me and making me feel my own Socratic life of importance. The real beauty of a church is when the pastor isn't needed and people are caring for each other and loving each other and crying on each other's shoulders and saying, yep, I'm sorry, I'm here, you're not alone. That's the beauty of it. So we're going to have communion together. We're going to sing a couple of songs, maybe one song. We maybe have time for 2. We're going to sing a couple of songs here. And they both speak of hope. The first song says, hope has a name. His name is Jesus. And while we do this, we're going to have communion together. You're invited. Tables in the back have communion elements. The ones up here are invisible. We didn't put them on up here, so don't come up here. Sorry about that. But in the back, there's elements, and on the tables, there's elements. So we're going to sing together a few songs, give you a blessing, get you out of here to enjoy the rest of your week.